When we discuss this issue with people, very often their first reaction is shock that this practice even exists, and secondly, a question as to why there wasn't an adequate law to deal with this crime in the first place. So we know that in reality, the situation is extremely complex and there have been huge barriers to bringing about change. So we're really pleased to be joined by a panel of people who have been at the forefront of the campaign to end child sacrifice through the passing of this new law. So to introduce the panel, and if you can wave when I say your name, Rachel Bentley, CEO and co-founder of Children on the Edge. She garnered a huge amount of support for the campaign, but also acted in an advisory capacity throughout with her legal training and humanitarian experience. Annie Ikpa, freelance television editor. If you look carefully, you might see an appearance from her cat as well throughout the evening. And she is the instigator of the bill. She really did start this ball rolling and has dedicated 7 years of her life traveling back and forth from the UK to Uganda to make this happen. Then we have our very own Winnie Biira, CEO of Children on the Edge Africa, who just in her spare time from running projects for over 35 communities and 6,000 children, has driven up and down for years to Parliament in Kampala to do anything and everything it took to promote the campaign for the passing of the bill. And then just recently joined, we have Supreme Court Judge Mike Chibita. A real honour to have you here. He was also formerly the Director of Public Prosecutions. Mike has a wide experience in directly prosecuting cases of child sacrifice and has been at the forefront of rallying support for the law. So that's had a huge impact. Hopefully, we will also hear from Honourable Atiku, who is the private MP who introduced the bill, but he's just got a little bit delayed in travel. So hopefully we'll see him later. So we have an illustrious panel. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, particularly our Ugandan contingent. I think looking at the clock, it's 9:10 where you are, PM. And there's a curfew in Uganda at the moment, so everyone is having to call in from home. So thank you so much for doing that. The internet may be a little patchy, so bear with us. Also, as a small advisory, we need to remind you that some individuals may find what is discussed this evening disturbing, as the subject matter is obviously very hard-hitting. And lastly, we'd love to see your questions. We're already seeing your comments in the side there. Just type your questions into the chat section, which you should find to the right of your screen, and we'll pose as many to the panel as we can. So thank you. With no further ado, I will just start with Rachel. I just want to ask you, Rachel, Children on the Edge started working in Jinja, Uganda back in 2012. How did the organisation end up becoming involved in the prevention of child sacrifice?
We were working and still work in the slum communities of Jinja, creating safe communities for children. So we work with from the very early days, we were working with a local Ugandan partner that was working on children's rights issues in Uganda, and particularly in those slums of Jinja. And one particular part of their program was setting up child protection teams. So protection teams from within the community with volunteers from the community itself, working on those teams to make those slums safer places for children. So it's trying to stamp out child abuse, domestic violence, and other issues of child protection. So simply to make those communities safer places for children, to make them places where children could thrive. So in their day-to-day work, and we were supporting them and partnering them and advising them in their day-to-day work, in one particular slum community, Masese 2, it was they had an incredible run of cases of child sacrifice. They managed to stop 1 or 2 cases, but unfortunately some children died and some were mutilated. And they managed over the years, through educating the community and having a vigilant team of watching for these perpetrators and chasing them out of the community, literally, to stamp out child sacrifice in that one community. However, we were aware that it was quite difficult to bring the perpetrators to justice. There were gaps in the law. You could bring a perpetrator to justice if they killed a child, under the penal law, under the Murder Act, or there was some grey area over in the trafficking legislation where you could bring a case, but it was very, very tricky to bring these perpetrators to justice. And if our team, who did very well, managed to stop child sacrifice in one community, and they did, there were 13 cases in the last 2 years when we first started working in that community. And a year later, the child protection team having been in place, or there were no more cases. They literally stamped out
incredible
child sacrifice. But the problem was the perpetrator then went on to another community and carried on doing it there. So we felt that though we were trying to reach as many communities as possible and set up as many child protection teams as possible, to make those places safer for children, to make those communities places where they could thrive, that actually it was impossible to do that right across Uganda. And we were very concerned that these perpetrators seemed to be getting away with it. And that there were also, quite importantly in this whole picture, there were people behind the scene who were financing this, often quite powerful people, often business people. And the belief being that if it's all to do with witchcraft, if you undertake a witchcraft ritual was the belief, and you use really pure blood, the blood of a child, whether that child was murdered or whether that child was mutilated, that would bring you great prosperity, that would it bless you, bring you wealth. And that's why these ceremonies took place and still take place, but hopefully will stop taking place, or perpetrators will be brought to justice when they do. That was the belief, that if you use a pure blood, i.e. the blood of a child, then it will bring you prosperity. But I think what's great about this new legislation is it doesn't just clamp down on the issue, it clamps down on those people who stand in the shadows on the sidelines, those powerful people who are often financing it. So some people were brought to justice who maybe killed a child, but those in the grey areas got lost. So in short, we realized that there was an issue here. We came across it literally day to day in the slums, and we would like, our vision is long term to have a child protection team in every single community in Uganda. Wouldn't that be great? But there needed to be national protection. We believe in creating protective environments for children at local level, in the family, in the school, in the community, but also at national level. So
you needed it all to work in parallel, essentially.
It needed to work in parallel. It was no good stamping it out in at the community level if those perpetrators then going to other communities and getting away with it. There needed to be a national protective environment.
Yeah. Okay. Annie, so you are the sole person that instigated this bill, and you've dedicated yourself to the fight for 7 years, so longer than our 5-year fight. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why it was that your life ended up taking this course?
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize, obviously, that my life would end up like this, actually. But
wasn't the plan.
It certainly wasn't the plan. My background is not in law or legislation or anything like that. I'm a video editor by trade, and back in 2014, I was editing a daytime show, which should sort of remain unnamed, and I felt a little sort of disillusioned and kind of fancied a bit of a change. I was a bit bored, and somebody recommended that I contact a lady called Lucy Buck, who is an English woman who set up a Ugandan NGO that rescued abandoned babies and found Ugandan families to adopt them. And every so often she would need, media volunteers to go over and sort of film for her, edit for her. And I just thought, yeah, why not? So I reached out to her, and the next thing I knew, I was on a flight to Uganda. And it was actually the very first day that I arrived, one of the representatives of the organization told me about a little girl who was at the baby's home where I'd be working, who had survived child sacrifice. And, I've got Nigerian heritage, and I've grown up hearing about witchcraft, witch doctors, juju, the occult, but I had never ever heard of child sacrifice, and I was absolutely horrified. And I knew there and then that A, I couldn't wait to meet this girl, and B, I wanted to know everything there was to know about this and try and help in any way I can. So I met this little girl who at the very beginning was like a shadow. She was visibly traumatized. She would sort of cower in the corner of a room and not engage with anybody, but over time, her and I just developed this most wonderful bond. And it was through her that I learned what this practice was. As Rachel said, it's you know, there's a widespread belief, not just in Uganda, that when you sacrifice a child, it will lead to riches, prosperity, power. And this little girl was rescued moments before she was due to be sacrificed. In Uganda, you know, often children are found in construction sites, buried under roads as a blessing, malls, and this little girl was found in a construction site, and the security guard saw what was happening and grabbed her and took her to this organization. And I just realized, look, I had 3 months in Uganda. I didn't really know anyone. I had loads of free time. And I just thought, why not make a little documentary? I had access to cameras, editing equipment. So yeah, I spent that time filming. I interviewed witch doctors, survivors of child sacrifice, siblings who had witnessed their siblings being sacrificed, parents who had lost their children, members of the judiciary, and formed this little documentary and showed it all around Uganda. I sort of turned up with a friend of mine with a little projector, portable projector, and just went to as many villages as we could, set up, screamed from the rooftops that this is wrong, this is happening, how can we end this? And ended up in Kampala with a sort of a screening in a cinema. But we just felt, there was a point where I just thought this wasn't doing anything. You know, it's all well and good saying that this is wrong and that it needs to stop, but it didn't feel as though what we were doing was particularly impactful. So I took the film to Parliament and I met the Deputy Speaker. This was all within 2014. Met the Deputy Speaker, Jacob Oluwanya, and he said, look, you know, there are gaps in legislation here. I think Uganda could really do with some specific legislation. But he said, look, it's going to be difficult. You're going to have to find a legislator. It's going to cost money, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, yeah, I can do it. Found a legislator who very kindly offered to draft the bill for free. And I extended my stay even further to help him. And that was how my journey into this began. Yeah.
And I wondered if I could move on to you, Mike. Before you were Supreme Court Judge, you were Director of Public Prosecutions. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about, in your professional experience, trying to prosecute perpetrators of human sacrifice. What were the gaps in legislation that caused particular problems in seeing justice done and preventing the practice?
Okay, thank you very much. You can hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Glad to be here. And part of the problem of prosecuting child sacrifice cases is that there was no specific law. You know, in prosecution, you prosecute according to what is written in the Penal Code Act and other criminal codes. And so, you know, you have offenses like infanticide. You know, you have homicides of different kinds, but then you have specific ones, and those ones are easy to go after: infanticide, suicide, terrorism, you know, vehicular homicide. They are all given their different names. Of course, the rest then we just charge as murder. Now, child sacrifice is a bit elusive because, unfortunately, unless the sacrifice has been successful, in other words, unless a child has been killed, you could not prosecute. For example, if you got a witch doctor red-handed with a child in their shrine, but the child was not killed, you couldn't prosecute them for anything because there was no law to cover that kind of thing. I mean, you could stretch and look for something. So that was the biggest shortcoming, because there was nothing specific. And so unless you waited for the offense to happen, then you could charge with murder. And yet you got many people in the attempt trafficking for child sacrifice or abducting for child sacrifice and that kind of thing. So the coming into force of the law will be able to bridge that gap.
Yeah, that's amazing. Did you find in your personal professional experience certain cases where the law stopped you from prosecuting people?
Yes, there were several cases. For example, somebody was found in a taxi, public transport, with a child who was not theirs. And when you put 2 and 2 together, you knew this child was on their way to being sacrificed. But when the person was taken to court and interrogation, he said, no, I just picked this child and I was trying to establish who the parents were and so on. I was just taking good care of them. And, you know, the child at that tender age cannot speak for themselves. And so we had a number of those cases. We had another case where a child was found in the witch doctor's shrine. And we knew that the next moment, really, that child was going to be sacrificed. But there was no law which talked about attempted child sacrifice. There was no law which, criminalized finding a child in a shrine, witch doctor's shrine. So we had a number of those cases, and unfortunately, the witch doctors had to go off because they were not caught in the actual act.
Yeah, that is terrible. I also wanted to, Winnie, you're back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you will.
So if I just move on to you, Winnie, I wondered if, you've been leading the community work in Ginger from the start, but you've also spent a huge amount of time working in the Ugandan parliament to bring this change in legislation. Why was it so important for you to dedicate your time to this?
Yeah, most importantly was the children. The manner in which these children were killed. They were mutilated while they are still alive. They cut off different parts of their body when they are viewing, when they are seeing them. I mean, it was so sad. It's so sad. So I said, I'll keep moving. I'll not give up until we see that our children are protected. Not only the children in Uganda, but the children in the whole world. The children have a right to live. Therefore, we should do all it takes to ensure that the children are protected. The manner in which it's done to the children. And secondly, these people we didn't have a specific law on that. So we fought hard to ensure that these children are protected and they have the right to live, and so that's kept me moving. It kept me moving. I am a mother and I work with children as well. So I really feel it really bad in me to see these children going through this. So I kept moving. I gave it all my all and I wasn't going to give up.
Rachel, all those years ago when you met Annie, what was it about her that made you decide that this initiative needed support? Obviously, you have to say nice things because she's here.
No, you don't.
Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we'd realised that there were gaps in the law. We didn't know much more about it than that. So when I got this email from this lady called Annie, it intrigued me. And, you know, we get loads of emails in the office every day from people wanting help or support or funding for their various initiatives to help children. But there was something about Annie's email. Her personality came through the email. And I thought, I've got to meet this lady. So I took Esther and I went to you, Esther. We both went up to London and met Annie and had coffee in Soho, if I recall rightly. And I was bowled over. There's as you heard just now, there's the absolute need to bring new legislation. There was the need to bring new legislation in Uganda to cover this huge and very serious gap. But to meet someone who had decided to try and do that, and to meet a young lady, a young woman who was very tenacious, and I was just inspired by her passion. I was inspired by her commitment. I was inspired by her single-mindedness. I knew it would be a David and Goliath type battle, but I just felt that she was a David and she had definitely taken on a Goliath, but she was up for the battle. So yeah, just something in her spirit, something about her. I thought if anyone can do it, she can do it. I was just totally inspired by her absolute passion and dedication. And also it was a ridiculous thing to say and to try and do. It was so ridiculous to say, we're going to bring new legislation. I'm going to try and bring new legislation in Uganda, but I knew the need for it. I thought, you know what? We're known as an organization for taking risks. certainly to try and protect the most vulnerable children around the world. And I thought we're going to take a risk and back this woman and support her. Everyone, a lot of major agencies would not touch it with a barge pole, and said that, and actually a couple of very senior executives from agencies that I won't mention the names of called me up and said that, what were we doing? Were we stupid? Did we not know that we're just throwing money down a black hole? It would disappear and nothing would change. But I believed in what Annie was doing, and I believed in her and her passion, and her absolute dedication to the cause. So what we didn't know at that point was how long it would take. Or actually, I kind of thought we could do it. Yeah.
And Annie, what was it that made you contact Children on the Edge and ask for support?
But first, thank you, Rachel. That was lovely words to hear. And I'm just so grateful that you. Thank you. I'm grateful that you did take a chance, because it was a massive chance on me, and that it paid off. I guess I didn't realize initially that I needed the kind of money that I did. I was just very much like, yeah, let's just do this, without really thinking that far ahead. And I think if I had thought that far ahead, I probably would have thought twice about continuing. But after I had sort of tracked down that legislator, he had very kindly come up with a draft of a bill. And I spent the next sort of 2 to 3 years going back and forth between London and Uganda. Now, when you introduce a private members bill, it's very, very costly. Everything costs money. And, I was going back to London, working, saving up enough money to go back to Uganda, support myself and mobilize MPs, because you need an awful lot of support in order to get something like this off the ground. And I did that I did know. So I would, go back every couple of months and meet with MPs. And after about 2 or 3 years, I'd got quite a nice little team together. But it was after meeting the ministry agenda, who was like, look, we'll support you, but you do need quite a lot of money, that I thought, right, I'm going to have to fundraise here, which nobody likes to do without any kind of guarantee. And I don't think people in Uganda took me all that seriously, actually. Like, here was this Mzungu, this, what I'm called in Uganda, a white person, just, showing their face every couple of months, screaming that we need to do something about child sacrifice, disappearing, then coming back with the same method. Like, I needed some backing. So I was very lucky, actually. I didn't have to look that long. I was given the details of Children on the Edge through a tele friend of mine. And I think it was probably the first or second email that I sent. And Rachel very kindly responded and met me in Soho during my very short lunch break. So, yes.
That's brilliant. We've got quite a few people in the chat asking to see your documentary. So, you might be embarrassed about it.
No.
Yes, you answer, folks.
Of course. No. Yeah, I can make the link shareable, but just a massive caveat that I'm a better editor now, I think.
So there's one question from John Riddell saying, will local police forces be inclined to investigate incidents of child sacrifice more now there's the bill? I guess this would be either directed to Mike or Annie.
Yes and no. I'm tempted to answer yes and no. But the presence of the so there was also a question highlighted, but I think it is supposed to come on later. So it's still a bill. It's not in force yet. And I think we'll talk about that later.
Yes.
But once it becomes law, then it will become easier for police to investigate, because there is a specific law, and the police, the investigators and the prosecutors, they act when there is an actual law, not when there is uproar against a particular practice. So the other reason why it will be easier is because police, at least in Uganda, they work in units. So you have the anti-narcotics, you have the anti-corruption, you have the anti-smuggling, and so on. Yeah. So they are likely to set up a unit and a child sacrifice unit, and then they will dedicate themselves to investigating those. offenses. So they work best when they are working as a unit. In a unit, then they know this is our, responsibility. This is our docket. When you don't have a particular unit, then you get investigators, you borrow investigators, and they are not full-time, they are not dedicated, they are not trained in that particular area. Yeah. Now, when you have a specific area like child sacrifice, then hopefully a unit will be set up for investigation and also a unit for prosecution. And then those people get specialized training in how they can investigate cases of child sacrifice, because all the different offenses require different expertise and training and skills. And so once you have a specialized unit, then they get all the expertise and the skills, and then they're able to do the job better. Because again, it is one of those things, if you have done it once before, then you know what pitfalls to avoid. You basically become better at what you are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also a question for you, Mike, from Nick Bambridge saying, what can we do to bring awareness and support for the bill to be made into the law going forward?
Okay, so that kind of goes to the question of what steps need to happen to make sure that the bill is implemented. So the next step is for the president to assent to the bill, and the president needs to assent to it before it becomes, once the president has appended his signature, then it becomes law. Once it has become law, then you need to work on sensitizing the public, especially the relevant public. And then you need to sensitize the police. We talked about setting up a unit in police. You then would need to set up a unit in prosecution. Then you would need to set up a unit or train some people in the judiciary, because the matter has to be investigated properly, prosecuted properly, and adjudicated properly. So you need sensitization in those areas. And then, of course, the local councils. There's a saying that, especially in Africa, it takes a village to raise a child, which is a good thing, but also it can have its, loose ends, because then a child can be left with a neighbor or with a cousin, and usually it is through those loose connections that somebody can take advantage. And by the time people realize a child is missing, it is too late. And then the other thing is the more you prosecute, the more prominence the law gains, because people read so-and-so was prosecuted doing this, and then it gains momentum through the media. And definitely we would have to continue working on sensitization programs with the new law.
That's brilliant. What are your hopes for the impact of the new law, and what are the next steps for children on the edge?
Goodness me. Well, I think Mike's
in a nutshell.
Yeah. I think Mike's just outlined the next steps. Obviously, all that he's explained, we want to see happen, which is the president's assent. We don't think there should be too much problem with that. But then to see it properly implemented through all the various stages that he explained. But my real hope, I suppose the umbrella hope, is that the legislation will act as a deterrent to those that consider or are considering committing this heinous crime, that so much so that it actually gets stamped out in the nation of Uganda. And my hope is that Uganda can lead the way, because this is wonderful. I met the technical team who worked on the bill, and it was an absolute honor to be in their presence. I just spent one day with them, and just to see them work on the actual legislation and the care that went into every word. It's wonderful legislation, and I think it can really be a benchmark for not just Africa, but other nations around the world where this practice does still go on. So my hope is, A, to see it really take hold and be implemented in Uganda, but also that the practice is eventually wiped out in Uganda because the law is strong, and that it puts people off from actually practicing this heinous act, that no longer becomes profitable to do it, and that they lead the way, particularly across the nation of Africa, but there are other countries as well. And then for us personally, as Children on the Edge, we will continue working grassroots in all of those slum communities. And our plan is, and it's already starting to take shape, is to see the child protection team model, which is an amazing model because, as I mentioned earlier, it's made up of volunteers from their own communities who are trained to make their own communities safer for children. So we'll continue working with those grassroots teams to make their communities safer, to make their communities places where children can thrive. And also we can now train them on this new legislation and explain how you can actually use the law to bring perpetrators to justice once we have it implemented. So yeah, we'll continue. The plan is to expand the child protection team model in different parts of Uganda, in key areas where there are very vulnerable children, and to create many more safer communities, but to educate and train on this new legislation. So that's our plan. And I will see what unfolds in the rest of Africa, see what Annie gets up to and the team here tonight. Possibly we can support and lend our hand to this being a benchmark for other nations to follow. So I think Uganda's done a really good job, and well, its parliament has done a really good job in passing this. And now we need to see it be signed off and implemented, and then hopefully be a benchmark.
We've actually got a question from Susan Durston for Winnie or Rachel. So maybe Rachel, you can help out here. Is there support for survivors or other traumatized children? And are children stigmatized in this situation that you're aware of?
There's certainly, I know of support. We've not come across stigma. Maybe that's something that Annie might know a bit more about. Thankfully, we've not come across that ourselves. But yes, there are networks, there are agencies, there's people that we refer to. Not enough of it, I'd say. There needs to be more work done on that. But
yeah, absolutely. Annie, what were some of the major challenges that you found along the way, along your long 7-year journey, that stick out?
I think there are a few. I think that I would say that there are probably 3 main challenges. I think firstly, financial difficulties. As I said earlier, it costs an astronomical amount to push a bill like this through. Everything costs money. And I think, you know, I when I met Children on the Edge, that we had a sort of budget in mind, didn't we?
I do remember. I'm not.
I mean, it was a laughable amount in comparison to, I think, what was probably spent. And I think, you know, every time we thought that this would be, you know, this would be the last meeting, this would be the last event, there was always another meeting and always another meeting. And these meetings cost thousands. They're not just, you know, and everything costs. So I think financially, yeah, that was a real challenge. But, you know, testament to Children on the Edge. I mean, your pockets are very deep, especially for this. So I never felt that I was, you know, knocking on a door that was never answered. I think that you always rose to every challenge that I and the rest of my team put in front of you, and nothing seemed too much. So, but that was uncomfortable. I think the second challenge was finding a team that we could trust, you know, and finding a team who were in this for the right reasons, to protect these children. Because not everybody who I met along this journey was. And it took a long time and a lot of disappointment to kind of figure out who I could trust, who we could trust, and who just had to go. But I'm pleased to say that, you know, by the end, our core team, you know, I could trust them with anything, and you know, we were able to finally get this through. So, but that was difficult, not knowing who I can count on, really. And then the last one, I'd say, was fear, actually, because especially early on, you know, child sacrifice is a really nasty business. There are people who profit from this, and you know, I definitely made a name for myself going over and not being particularly quiet about the fact that I was going to dedicate everything I had to stop this practice. And, you know, I was scared. I had threats. I had people coming to my house demanding to know where I was. I was followed. I was nearly deported. I was told that, you know, I better stop this, otherwise there'll be consequences, and all of this. So that I think one of the biggest challenges was just constantly reminding myself that this is bigger than me, and that I've just got to carry on no matter, you know, no matter what. But in a weird way, whenever I did get a kind of threat, it just kind of spurred me on in a way, because it meant that I was getting that little bit closer, and that, you know, I was a threat actually. And what I was doing was threatening to these people, because they knew and they know that this law is really going to make a difference. And it just spurred me on, I think, if anything else. I mean, obviously I was terrified, but you know, nothing was going to stand in my way.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And Mike, as you were promoting the bill and giving it your support along the way, what were the major challenges that you found, or the main areas of pushback to what you were trying to achieve?
So, of course, I got introduced to this when Annie walked into my office when I was Director of Public Prosecutions. And as Director, you meet many people with many stories. And so you always listen and see who is serious, who has something important. And so when Annie walked in and she was telling me about this, I had heard about the need for this law. But again, as Director, you have to spend your energies prosecuting the offenses that are already available to you. So when she came in, and as somebody else has already mentioned, I looked at this young girl, and she was so passionate. And I thought, wow. So she struck a nerve, because in my earlier days as a High Court judge, I had handled the matter of child sacrifice. And that was 2011, before the advent in Uganda of social media as we know it. But I had never handled a case where I got so much feedback from the public. Basically, my mailbox and my phone message box were so full of people saying, thank you, you have done this. So the thing of child sacrifice kind of stayed with me. And so when Annie came, it kind of struck a chord. Of course, one of the challenges is I was not, and I'm not a member of parliament, so my influence was really little. And so the challenges that Annie has talked about is when she would come to me and tell me about the challenges, I could only encourage her and say, no, you keep going, you need to see so and so. And of course, one of the ones which really disillusioned me was to know that some of the people who were supposedly allies were actually not. They turned out to be, this really disheartened me and so on. But I knew my job was to try and encourage Annie as much as possible and talk whenever she needed me to go to talk to parliamentarians, I would. And one of the challenges for me and frustrating was that we were working on this law, but I could see the glaring, gaps in the law. And every month I would have to deal with cases of child sacrifice, either attempt and all. So I knew we needed this law. And yet it was being so slow in moving. You know what they say about making laws and making sausages, that really, if you want to enjoy them after that, you don't need to see the process. So really, this was one of those which I was following closely through Annie, and I could see things were not working out as fast. And somebody from outside Uganda was more passionate about it than the people who should be the representatives of the people.
Yeah, brilliant.
Can I jump in actually? Because Mike, when I spoke about, how things got dangerous, it was during that time where, Mike, you really saved me and the bill at that point, because it was then everything had sort of severed. I felt like there was nowhere to turn. This direction would have led to danger. This direction would have led to danger. And if I did nothing, the bill would go nowhere. So for 3 months, I sort of sat in Uganda, not wanting to come home because I didn't want to feel like a failure, but not wanting to make a move because I was terrified. And after so long, I reached out to Mike, and it was you who kind of resurrected the bill. So I know I've thanked you, but I just wanted people on this call to just realize and understand just how instrumental you were in this journey. And thank you again.
Annie, you are the one. You are the one who did this, who recruited us in this. So really, ours was really a little supporting role.
I don't agree.
I wanted to flag one thing that possibly we've lost. We were very thankful. Most organisations didn't want to be involved in this, but halfway through our journey, or possibly 3/4 of the way through the journey, World Vision did join in with us, and we worked alongside World Vision to bring the change. And actually, they have a name that we don't have. They have clout that we don't have, and so we're very thankful to the very good partnership that we formed with World Vision in the last few years of the journey of the bill, because it wouldn't have been made possible without World Vision support as well.
With the deterrent being in place for the perpetrators of child sacrifice, would they move on to some other form of abuse, or do you think that it will help to kind of disrupt and break down the whole belief system around child sacrifice?
Thank you. They would move on to something else, and hopefully they would move on to something more profitable and more productive, and that will contribute better to the country. So I hope they would move on to agriculture and all. We have plenty of land for them to farm. So with deterrent in several of those areas, yeah, I'm hoping they would move on to something more productive.
Yeah.
Hello.
I think. Okay, here we have.
Hi, welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm on and off because I'm driving from Kasese. I've just arrived home.
Oh, thank you so much for joining so late.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're having a little trouble hearing you, but I'll just try and ask one question around why it was so vital that the law passed when it did in the 10th Parliament. We understand that the process would have been set back quite a long time if it had not passed just recently.
It's true. We sought for leave. Of course, this has been a private member's bill, and we sought leave in 2017. And since that time, we have been engaging with various stakeholders and, moving across the country to consult and shaping the bill. Initially, we had associated the problem of human sacrifice closely with witchcraft. And we had intended, the first objective was to amend to repeal the Witchcraft Act so that we have the prevention and prohibition of human sacrifice with some of the provisions in the current Witchcraft Act. But as we progressed, we realized that there was no need to repeal the Witchcraft Act, but to rather move with this law independently, and also to ensure that we have a standalone law that will deal with the human sacrifice as a crime, and therefore partly that contributed to the delay in coming up with this bill to pass. But I must say that this gave us an opportunity to go into the details. The law is inadequate to be able to line up all these people who have been involved, from kidnapping a child, taking the child to a shrine, and sacrificing or taking body parts, transporting body parts to a person who has paid money. So really, the time that we took to get the opinion of each and every key stakeholder, from Mike as the DPP and his team, to the judges, where we had Justice Yasini Nyanzi, to even involving the witch doctors who are part of the team that are actively involved in child sacrifice. And then what we also call the traditional leaders, because witch doctors or traditional medicine practitioners are closely associated with the traditional cultural institutions. So we had to involve all these and also reaching out to the district authorities. We had to have this opportunity to reach out to all the stakeholders, engage them, get their views, even reach out to the communities, get their opinion about these cases, get views of victims, of even survivors of human child sacrifice. So for me, yes, it took much longer than we expected, but the time we took was also all involving. We had to use it to engage all the stakeholders, engage with the Law Reform Commission, engage with the Uganda Law Society, and even do benchmarking within East Africa.
You must have been quite overwhelmed to get the phone call to hear that it had gone through.
Yes, I was very overwhelmed with emotions.
Annie, maybe you can describe it from your point of view.
I think, it was quite sudden, actually. Because we had, what sort of custom is that the morning of the second reading of a bill, or the day before, you sort of gather as many MPs as you can and mobilize them, remind them of the bill, remind them of what you're trying to do, to kind of rally support, really. And we did that on the Monday, and we still weren't on the order paper. You have to be on the order paper in order to present a bill to the House. And the end of the 10th Parliament was looming. Basically, if we hadn't passed it by the Friday, then it would have been fine, saved until the next Parliament. But there are a lot of new MPs coming through. We would have had to not exactly start again, but added another year or two onto this already very long process. So we held this meeting anyway in the blind hope that we would present that week. And I mean, that meeting was honourable. You can, I'm sure you'll agree, you weren't even in the country. The night before, I got a call saying, can we postpone this meeting? I'm not even around, not even in the country. No is the answer. We have to have this meeting, come rain or shine. We have to go for it. Nobody actually turned up from the team, so it didn't go as planned at all. However, during that meeting, we learned that we were on the order paper as business to follow, and what that means is that if once everything on the actual agenda has been done, then we'll get to the business to follow. And we were under the business to follow. But we were told there is no way it will be before Thursday. So just relax, do your thing. We'll probably present on Thursday, maybe Friday. And then the next day, I remember waking up, just thinking, right, I've got today off, wandered into the living room in my pajamas and got a call from one of the legislators at Parliament to say, we're on the order paper for 10:30, and it was 10 o'clock. And I did this like silent dance. And then he was like, well, but wait, Honourable is not in the country. So we've got no one to present it. And I was like, oh my word, what are we going to do? So like everything with this bill, I went from up here to down there in seconds, but ran into my bedroom, put on the first thing that I could find, and got on a boda, which is a Ugandan sort of motorcycle taxi, highly dangerous. And I know mum's on this call. I promised I'd never use them, but I had to in that moment because I had about 20 minutes to get to Parliament. And I was calling people on the way, and everyone knows on a boda, don't use your phone because you're going to get it nicked. But I didn't have a choice. Turned out that Honourable, thankfully, was in the country, and we met at the gates, and he took one look at me, and I just knew that something wasn't quite right. And I was like, am I not dressed correctly? And I wasn't. I was in this, like, I'm not going to go and get it, but a very similar sort of jumpsuit, but very weekend wear. And he was like, I don't think they're going to let you in. And I was like, what? what? And he put me in touch. We got through security, and I think, tell me if I'm wrong, Honourable, but were you embarrassed to be standing next to me? I knew it.
Not at all.
You were.
Your dress code was not official.
It was awful. So he put me in touch with
but you're smart.
He put me in touch with his assistant, and you know, I swear I would have asked for the clothes off her back if we were at the same side, because you know, I needed to be there, and
that was a question.
It was awful. We went up to the office, and luckily there was a live stream of the house, so we could see what was going on, and luckily the speaker hadn't arrived. So I called my friend and got her to drop stuff over on another border, but I was absolutely frantic, calling her every 2 minutes, and the clothes turned up on time. I was putting on my heels, and I don't wear heels, just as Honourable called me to say, right, we're sitting, come down, and I made it just in the nick of time. But my word, yeah, I just, because I always knew I wanted to be there the moment that it passed or failed, but I just wanted to be there in that moment. And to think that there was a chance of me not going to be present for it because I'd turned up in the wrong clothes was just, I wasn't going to accept that. But yeah, luckily I was able to attend, and it was a very, very, very magical moment. Yeah. And
we hear that you'd made a few sort of contingency plans with Post-its and things in your fridge to reassure yourself. If it hadn't have passed, I'm sure we'd have all done the same thing.
Yeah, I think with everything that is involved in this journey, this project, nothing is guaranteed, and I just knew that leaving London, that I could come back without it having passed, and I just wanted to give myself a bit of a lift. So I put a post-it on my door, which is still there, and it said, let me go and grab it because I can't remember exactly what it says.
Still happening live.
It says, I don't know if this is back to front. Yes, it is. It says, no matter what, you did your best, welcome home, just in case.
And how long do you think you'll keep that post-it note on your door?
Forever, until I hadn't taken it down. So for as long as, yeah, just as a nice little reminder that it all worked out.
That's amazing. I think it was the day was amazing for Winnie as well. But are you frozen, Winnie, at the moment? I'd love to hear about it from your point of view. I think there was a very fast drive over to Kampala to help you out, wasn't it, Annie?
Yeah,
Winnie.
Well, Winnie was stuck in Ginger, which is a couple of hours away. But we were hysterical. Like I called her because we've got a WhatsApp group. But I just wanted to not be online while I was, but I was aware of all these messages coming through because we had somebody from the team in Parliament, and they were shooting off messages into the group. So I knew that people were abreast of what was happening. But I just wanted to be in the moment. I didn't really want to look at my phone. But when the bill actually passed and I spoke to Winnie, oh, she was screaming. I mean, it was, you couldn't. I had the phone out here. It was just tears upon tears upon tears. And yeah, wasn't it, Winnie? Yeah, no, it was.
Unmute yourself there. We've got you live. There's Winnie.
I think we can hear you. It was quite a day for you, wasn't it, Winnie?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was the best day of my life when the bill passed. We were having a staff meeting, and then after the meeting, I was preparing to go to Kampala the following day because we thought the bill would be ready the following day. So getting to office again, I check my phone, messages are on, missed calls, the bill is being read. I screamed to the top of my voice. I couldn't believe it. And I'd asked the staff, please let us pray. The bill is here, it's going to pass. Tomorrow, let's pray. Not knowing that it was already going on in Parliament. So we had to connect the computers, laptops, phones, so we could follow. So we started following every step, and everyone was screaming within their offices, and it was being supported over overwhelmingly by the members of parliament. I was so happy. I couldn't believe all the time that we went through, and we knew the 10th parliament was moving on, and then I couldn't imagine the bill going to the 11th parliament. So I was like, God, thank you. This is the best gift that you have given us as children on the edge. This is the best gift that you're giving to the children we are taking care of. Not only children in Uganda, but children of the whole world. Because I know even other countries are going to benchmark on how this happened. It was a long way, but it's very, very amazing. It was the greatest time of our life. We cried for almost a whole week. But God really made it for us. And at least I know this is one thing that we have done for the country and the whole world. We are very, very grateful. Annie, thank you so much for your support. And I hope you're wiping your tears now.
Oh,
thank you for being here for us.
I can't begin to cry because it would be
Rachel, I don't know. Rachel was the first person to call me, and I was like, my goodness, I can't believe this. I was just in tears. I couldn't believe all this long we've gotten there. Towards the last minute, I was so excited, and I'm still excited. But though we still have some way to go, we still have to sensitize the people and letting them know that having a law when the president assents does not mean that we shouldn't take care of our children. Because when the child is sacrificed, the law does not bring back a life. No, the child is gone. So it remains our sole responsibility as parents to take good care of our children.
Yeah.
Can I just say, while we've got Winnie here, Winnie, a lot of us were involved and walked the journey, and Annie instigated it, and everyone was very key along the way and played their part. But you were the only person who sat there day in, day out, and were always there, constant presence. And I used to have meetings with Winnie, and her phone would constantly go, and I could see the name of the person sending message, and it was Honourable Atiku. So I used to joke and say there was a hotline between Honourable and Winnie's phone. So she was day in, day out behind the scenes. So people played some spectacular parts on this journey, but Winnie, you really were there every single day, and your phone was literally live with the bill every day. I can be testament to that. So thank you.
And Winnie, you were saying about the bill being a benchmark for other countries. You really you feel that other countries that have this same problem might be inspired by the change in Uganda?
Very positive they will have to come and benchmark and see how we did it, because even in Uganda here some people are telling us this is very highly political. Will you make it? It won't go through, but we never gave up. But the fact that we have done it up to this point, when the president assents to it and it becomes law, we are sure other countries will come and have a benchmark and will protect and save lives of so many children around the world. I'm very positive that will happen because it's a law of its own kind.
Yeah, can I jump in there? It's the very first law. There's no other legislation like this that exists in the world. There are a couple of provisions in an Indian law. However, this is the first law of its kind that is comprehensive, that is absolutely watertight. It completely defines child sacrifice and creates an offence for this. So we've done the hard work, which means that other countries suffering from this, as you know, my team has said, can just very, very easily grab our law, localize it, and protect the children of their own country. And that has got to be, I think that is part of the legacy of this journey. Yeah, that it should hopefully be a cost-effective, very easy sort of way to, you know, and quick way to protect as many children as possible in other countries that are suffering from this. And I think that is what I'm really most proud of, that we've really not just changed the lives of children in Uganda, but children, many children. I can't say anymore, otherwise I'll get really emotional. But I think that's something we should be very, very proud of. Yeah, absolutely.
And Annie keeps correcting me, and quite rightly so. I keep saying the law was changed, or we changed the law. I actually said no, we introduced new legislation. So we introduced a new law, and that's which is much more significant, obviously.
There was a question from the group about whether there'll be some sort of measurement of the impact of the law as the years go by. I guess that might be a little bit too early to tell. I don't know what you think about that, Annie or Mike or Winnie.
I don't know, Mike. I can answer, but yeah, I think Mike would be better placed.
Go for it, Annie, then I can come in after.
I think Rachel mentioned earlier that this law will act as a deterrent. I think most definitely. I think it is taking no prisoners, so to speak. It's a really well thought out law. And for the first time, the Ministry of Legal, when they were sort of going through our bill, they included us, you know, those who have been on the ground. It's very unusual. They don't normally do this, that the MPs sit amongst themselves and they go through every single clause by clause. Do we need this clause? No. Should we tweak it here? Should we lose it? You know, and this time we were very much involved. And, you know, I think that has made such a difference because we spoke up and said, well, actually, no, we need to amend this because we've heard of a situation where a child, for example, was kept in a shrine for 7 years of her life and was very gradually sacrificed. I won't go into detail, but if we hadn't been there, their definition would have been very kind of, wouldn't have been broad enough to include a situation like that, which would have meant that if something like that did happen once the law had been passed, we wouldn't have been able to charge them with something adequate. So I think as a deterrent, I think that is probably one of the most important things. But also, I think once stage 2 of this, and I know that, you know, I'm possibly getting ahead of myself here, but is to sensitize the community. And I think once they understand that the government is making concerted effort to stop this practice, they might be more inclined to listen and to be more susceptible to change. And I think that is one of the most influential things that this bill is going to do, I hope, which will stand the test of time. That, you know, Ugandan parliament has taken this seriously. We put all this money into it and we've actually introduced this new legislation. So yeah, I feel like it would really give the community a boost that, yeah, we're doing something about it.
Do you have anything to add, Mike, to that?
So yeah, basically just to say that, of course, you know, impact can be qualitative or quantitative, and it is easier to measure quantitatively. So the police releases a crime report every year, and the crime report is according to categories. So you have traffic offenses, you have homicides, you have drug trafficking, human trafficking. So child sacrifice has never been a category under the police report. So quantitatively, once the law is assented to, then it can become a case category and police will begin monitoring how many offenses of child sacrifice have been reported and that kind of thing. Then you can be able to measure a year from that. Qualitatively, I guess there are different measures. It will be more difficult, but I guess it will be something that you can measure by how the lives of children have improved. It is more subtle, but I think you can measure impact once you get the right parameters.
Yeah, and Winnie, for the child protection teams working in the communities around Jinja, do you think that with the legislation in place, they will have more confidence to be protecting their children? I think we lost her.
I'll pick up that. Yes, we intend the child protection teams. We'll be looking at new training to inform them about the law, and yes, I think it will empower them greatly. Without going into the detail of it because it's quite complicated, but yes, I think we can really empower those teams to
because they often use sort of talk about the law in the community workshops to update people about the fact that things are serious issues. So I can imagine it being in law will make a huge difference.
I mean, lots of workshops go on in those slum communities that the child protection teams are part of, that involve sometimes just them or sometimes the wider community, to educate them on how to create a more protective environment for children on child protection, every aspect of child protection. This would be another aspect that we certainly train on going forward, and not just us, hopefully lots of organisations, and we'll try and perpetuate that across the nation of Uganda.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Annie, for you, what would be your hopes for the next steps? We do have somebody in the comments asking whether you can start to introduce the law in other countries.
Yes, yes, definitely. I think, like, throughout this whole journey, I've always thought, right, once this passes, because I always knew deep down it would. Once it passes, and that is me done. You know, I've done my charity for life. I've spent enough money, you know, I don't want to have any more involvement in this. That will be me, you know, very happy to just stop there and just get on with my life. But it spurred me on, if anything, and I just want to keep going with it. And whether it's child sack, I mean, I think it will probably be work within this field. I just feel that it's something that I'm good at and that help people, and I just can't keep ignoring that. So I will continue. It's just how, Mike, I know we've spoken about the possibility of training up the judiciary. I think that that's something I'd love to get involved in. I'd love to work with children. I'd like to get into, you know, schools and help somehow put this on the curriculum, because I think it's the sensitization of communities that is really what's really needed now. So there's lots to do. I just need to work out what and how.
Yeah.
And we're going to need some money. Yeah. It's going to need money again. So whatever it is won't be cheap. Yeah.
Never is. Well, it's actually getting quite late now for our Ugandan contingent. And so I just wanted to see if there's anything else from the panel that you particularly wanted to bring up before we started to take the last questions.
Happy to go with the last questions. Yeah.
Happy to go with the last questions. Okay, so one of them was to do with trafficking. Does trafficking children for sacrifice take place across borders? And if so, is there international coordination? I guess this might be one for Mike.
Well, thank you very much. So as director, when I was director, we had a unit for human trafficking, and of course, for human trafficking, it doesn't restrict itself to age or gender, and so we had domestic trafficking, and then we had cross-border trafficking. We found that most of the children were trafficked domestically within the borders of the country, and the cross-border was mostly adults. Adult girls, adult boys, and all. So the trafficking of children is mostly domestic, and you know, there are people, the witch doctors may not be able to go and get the children themselves, so they get contacts from different places who then supply them with the children, and that was part of the problem which this law has sought to cure. That you would find somebody with a child who is not theirs, but that in itself was not a lawful act per se. So they could explain themselves away and that kind of thing. So with the coming into force of this law, now you'll be able to bridge that gap and make cause the offense of attempted trafficking and that kind of thing to happen. So cross-border, of course, if there were any cross-border trafficking in children, unfortunately, we would not know, because children are small and they are vulnerable. And usually, if they are trafficked for sacrifice purposes, usually, I mean, they'll be dead before you know it. And as Annie explained at the beginning, the people who do this kind of thing want them to put in the foundations of buildings. So it is such a, in a way, secretive, offense. So who knows how many children from across the border in different under different buildings of different countries.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Well, we've got a huge amount, overwhelming amount of support in the chat to everybody on the panel. Just saying thank you and how inspired everybody is. I'm sure you can read through that at your leisure, and rest assured for our audience, if you've asked a question that hasn't been answered, we will do our best to get back to you. But it being 8:30 in our country and 11:30. Am I right? 10:30? 10:30 in Uganda now. We should probably let our panel go. But just want to
jump in just quickly before they do go, because there was one question that's quite pertinent, I think, that I saw come through a few times.
Oh, yes.
And that was how long it would take to get the assent of the president.
Yeah.
What that process would look like. Does anybody know before our Ugandans leave the room?
Okay, yeah, sure. Mike, I think Winnie. Let's see if I can get her back in.
Okay, so it usually takes anywhere from 1 day to, I think the president has about 3 months within which to assent. If he doesn't assent within 3 months, then the law goes back to parliament. And as you know, we have just changed parliaments. So that would be a big problem. I don't see any reason why the president will not assent to this. But right now we are in transition. A new government has just been sworn in. So a new parliament, and the president right now is in the process of forming a cabinet, appointing a cabinet. And I think that's the most urgent thing for him. So, but we are hoping this week, next week, a new cabinet will be in place. And with the new cabinet, then you have a new attorney general. And then the new attorney general should be able to follow up all the bills that are pending signing. But also the president then will have a lot of pressure off his back, because right now the thing I think that is giving him sleepless nights is who will be vice president, who will be prime minister, who will be attorney general. And I think once he's done with those, then so hopefully before the end of this month, we should see the bill assented to, unless there are some problems with it, which I don't think there should be.
There are no problems with it. Get it done. Fine.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Is there anything else anybody else would like to say before we wrap up? All good.
I just would like to thank Annie for having come to my office that day and having stayed the course. I told her the day before that, you know, I tried to take risk management, and I had taken risk management of this bill, and the time left for the parliament, and knowing a number of members of parliament had lost their seats, we would have a problem of quorum. So I had gently suggested to him that she should prepare herself for the non-passing of this bill, because there would be no quorum, there would be, and so on. So when she called me that the bill had actually been passed and she was crying on the phone, I said, wow, I have again been proved wrong. My pessimism has been, you know, disproved, but very, very good news. And so Annie and all the people behind her, I kept asking her, who, I mean, Annie, I see you, who is behind you, and that kind of thing, and said, I work with some friends and so on. All the people behind, thank you very much. You didn't have to do this. You did it for the children of Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. So any more information anybody needs, you can find on our website, and we'll be following up with a email with a few details, and we have recorded this evening. So if there's anybody that you'd like to share this recording with, do get in touch at communications@childrenontheedge.org, and we'll try and send something through to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a good night.